A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Thomas. Jesus says, "A city built on a high hill and fortified cannot fall, nor can it be hidden." Jesus says, "What you will hear in your ear, in the other ear, proclaim from your rooftops. After all, no one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, nor does one put it in a hidden place. Rather, one puts it on a lampstand, so that all who come and go will see the light." Jesus says, if a blind person leads a blind person, both of them fall into the pit. Jesus says, one can't enter a strong man's house and take it by force without tying his hands. Then one can loot his house. Jesus says, don't fret from morning to evening and from evening to morning about your food, what you are going to eat, or about your clothing, what you are going to wear. You are much better than the lilies, which don't card and never spin. As for you, when you have no garment, what are you going to put on? Who could add to your lifespan? The same one will give you your garment. His disciples said, when will you be revealed to us, and when will we see you? Jesus said, when you strip without being ashamed, and you take your clothes and put them under your feet like little children and trample them, then you will see the Son of the Living One, and you will not be afraid. Jesus says, often you have desired to hear these sayings that I am speaking to you, and you have no one else from whom to hear them. There will be days when you will seek me, and you will not find me. A word inspired by God. I love designing and constructing buildings. So when I was in Kenya, I did a lot of it. Hospitals, churches, schools, missions, convents. We constantly had several building projects going. I love doing it. And one of the final phases of any building project, when the electrical system had been installed and we'd finally hooked it up to, we normally had big, powerful 40 horsepower diesel lister generators. That would be the power system for the compound. That was like the second last job. And then the last one was connecting up the internal plumbing to a long drop. And this is what a long drop consisted of. Different tribes in Kenya specialize in different kind of crafts. The Luo, for instance, were really, really good at quarrying stone. They were brilliant at it, stonemasons. The Kisi had an extraordinary ability for digging holes. So they would be employed to dig these long drops. So a guy would come out literally with a little pickaxe, and the handle was about this length, about a foot long, and there's the pickaxe, and a bucket and a helper. And he would squat on the ground and describe a perfect circle about 4 feet in diameter, and then he'd start digging, throwing the earth aside, and within 4 or 5 days he was down about 40 feet down. Literally 40 feet down. The other guy is standing there with a bucket on a rope, handing it down to him, and he's filling it, and he's pulling out the earth and throwing it aside, and they get down about 40 feet in a week. And he's literally cramped down there, literally going around in circles, just chopping, and throwing the stuff back up. And then we connect the sewer system to that, put a cover over it, and that was our septic system. It's called a long drop. And then depending on what the building was, if it was like a school or something that was used a lot, after about 5 or 6 years, it'd be pretty damn full. And so a huge big truck would come out, a big tank, and a 6-inch diameter a flexible hose, and you'd insert it down into this, and then you'd extract the stuff. And it was known euphemistically, the truck was known as a honeysucker. It is, okay. Okay. So that's how you extract the stuff. Then it was good for another 10 or 15 years. And so in 1994, when I bought the little cabin up in Healdsburg, which I lived in for about 11 years before I built my real house, and at that stage, the cabin had been built in 1880. There was no indoor plumbing whatsoever. There weren't even walls to the house at that stage. So one of the first things I did was to bring in a guy with a backhoe, and we dug out a pit, and I found an old tank on the grounds, a big 500-gallon tank, and buried it, and then connected up the sewer system to it. And we used it for about 11 years, and it got full. And so I brought up a honeysucker, and the honeysucker came up, and extracted the whole thing, and it's good to go again. Now, whether you realize it or not, every one of you who lives in an urban situation, you're pretty much in a similar circumstance. You're connected up literally to an urban honeysucker, basically. All the waste that's generated in the house is being sucked out into this sewer system. So as long as there's a honeysucker, you're in business. Things are fine. It's when the honeysucker turns into a honey blower that you're in trouble. So can you imagine being connected up to a system where if you hit a switch, instead of extracting waste from the house, it starts belching waste back into the house. And for good measure, you have 3 or 4 such receptacles in your house to make sure that all the rooms can be flooded. And because we live in the 2009s, we don't have to pull chains anymore, hit spigots. We have remote control. We can turn this on and off at will. Now, it feels to me that that's what a lot of us are doing a lot of the time, except we don't call these things toilets anymore or urinals anymore. We call them television sets and we call them radios. And for a lot of it, what we're doing is we've turned these things into honey blowers. And we give little remote controls to our kids and they turn it on and we force feed them all kinds of violence. Now the good news is that these systems are plugged in to many different outlets. So there's some really good stuff out there, there's history channels out there, there's nature channels out there, there's really good entertainment out there, but a lot of what's coming through is violence, and a lot of what's coming through is news which is filling us with fear and terror and anxiety and prejudice, and we're giving these remote controls to our kids so they can activate the honey blower at any stage of their life. So it's very, very important. We are the Word of God made flesh. And I want to talk about today about how do you nurture the Word made flesh? Or how do you poison the Word made flesh? So I can just make 4 main points today. The first one I will talk about, how does the Word become flesh? What's the mechanism through which the Word becomes flesh? Secondly, when does the Word become flesh? Thirdly, how often does the Word become flesh? And then finally, is it only the Word of God that becomes flesh? So they're the 4 points I'll make this morning. So the first one, how does the Word become flesh? And I'm going to talk about humans for a few moments. It goes through 7 stages, it seems to me, as I try to reconstruct the model in my own mind. The first stage of the model is that ineffable source, and I prefer the word source to the word God, because the word God has so many negative connotations throughout history. So source for me is the ineffable origin of all that is. So the ineffable origin gives birth, or from it emanates spirit. That's the first stage in the process of Word becoming flesh. So from source emanates spirit. And then spirit articulates itself as souls. And spirit is the same relationship to souls as Shakespeare is to Hamlet. In other words, Shakespeare is the genius who created Hamlet and Macbeth and the sonnets and lots of other stuff. And spirit is that which created all of the souls. Now, there's more to Shakespeare than his works, and there's more to spirit than just the souls that emanate from it. But that's the second stage. Souls are the emanation from spirit. Then, as souls decide to have an incarnational experience, they plan 5 more stages of the process to get down here. And the first thing they create is, they create for themselves, each soul creates for itself a causal body. And the causal body has the following functions. The causal body will be the master archives for this soul's incarnational experiences. No matter how many incarnational experiences it has, in how many different universes, in however many different dimensions, it will archive all of these in this master archive called the Akashic Records, or called the causal body. So that's the first body the soul creates for itself. So this causal body functions as a master archives for all of the experiences that will be generated all the way down the line through all subsequent incarnations. Moreover, it's a level at which all souls are interconnected. The causal body is truly transpersonal, which means we are totally connected to each other. And that is why at the causal body level, we experience psychic abilities, telekinesis, telepathy, clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, precognition, telekinesis, these kinds of things. Because there is only one of us at that level, the causal body connects all of us transpersonally to each other. So we don't see distinctions between ourselves and others. We are built into the information matrix of spirit. So there's no separation at that level. So that's the first level that the soul creates for itself. Then secondly, it creates a mental body. And the mental body is going to be the intelligence of the system as it grounds itself in physicality. And so it'll be the intelligence we will use to help us understand what the laws are going to be like in whatever universe we choose to incarnate, in whatever dimension of that universe we choose to incarnate, in whatever planet we decide to incarnate upon, in whatever species we decide to incarnate, whether we decide to incarnate as trees or as human beings. We're going to need an appropriate kind of intelligence. The mental body provides that. And moreover, if we're born within a particular gender or ethnic group or culture or religion, there'll be a specific kind of intelligence necessary to operate in that group. And so the mental body creates all of that paraphernalia so that we have access to the intelligence necessary for that kind of incarnation. Then the next step is we create an astral body for ourselves. And the astral body has 4 very different functions. And the first function of an astral body is that it allows us to dream and to travel astrally. So when you go to sleep at night, you climb aboard a different level of yourself, your astral self. And this astral self has very different capabilities from your physical self. So time is very different here. Causation is very, very different here. Location, space is very, very different here. So when you travel astrally, you can go into very, very different realms that you can't get at in your physical body. And basically there are 2 levels to the astral plane. There's a lower astral plane where we're going to run in, as we're dreaming at night, we're going to run into other dreamers in their astral bodies. And sometimes we're going to run into discombobulated entities. We're going to run into souls recently departed who are disconcerted and lost and earth-locked. We're going to run into those. And some of those encounters will be a little bit frightening to us. If we manage to get to the higher astral planes, we will interact with beings of light, angelic presences. And these are really powerful dreams when we have these kinds of dreams. They're very real. We're interacting with light beings. We're interacting with avatars, very advanced teachers. And this is possible every night as we dream. So that's one function of the astral body. The second function of the astral body is it is the place at which we experience our emotions. And emotions are a very interesting gift to the human experience, because emotions are an early warning system that whatever we're thinking is either good for us or bad for us. So very, very quickly, depending on what my emotion is, if I'm feeling really anxious, it's an early warning system to tell me whatever you've been thinking just now has created this anxiety. If you like the anxiety, keep thinking those kind of thoughts. If you don't like the anxiety, start thinking different kinds of thoughts. If your emotion right now is that you're really, really feeling great, it's an early warning system to say, whatever you were just thinking right now is really good. Keep thinking that kind of thoughts. So our emotions act as a very quick early warning system to clue us in as to what we're thinking. Because most of the time, we're not aware of our thinking. We're just daydreaming, and it's creating all kinds of emotional reactions in us, and we have no control over it, as long as we don't plug in and say, is this a good feeling or a bad feeling? Whichever feeling it is always created by a thought. So let me go back and figure out, what was I thinking before I had that feeling? Now I can change the thought if it wasn't leading to good feeling. So that's the second function of the astral body. A third function of the astral body is that it acts as an archive for just one incarnation, where the causal body acts as an archive for all of the incarnations I will ever have. This one acts as just a repository for a particular incarnation. And the fourth ability of the astral body, it seems to me, is that it allows us simultaneously to inhabit parallel universes. We can speed up our learning by simultaneously having experiences in very different spacesuits at the same time, or even different dimensions. We have that ability at the astral level to inhabit different dimensions simultaneously. So that's the astral body we create for ourselves. Then the next step down is we create an etheric body, an energy body for ourselves. And this will become the blueprint for the physical printout, because the physical body is literally just a computer printout from a higher level. And so the physical body is the printout from the etheric. And the etheric is the intelligence of the blueprint. You want to design a physical body, you sit down and you draw your blueprint. You draw your plumbing, you draw your electrical system, and you draw the foundation stone and the roofing and the insulation, whatever is important to you. And so this level of body contains the intelligence for building your physical body, and for repairing your physical body. When the body heals itself, what's happening? The etheric body is kicking in, looking at the blueprint, saying there's a problem here, let's repair the problem. Because we're healing mechanisms. And the healing part of us is the etheric body, which is why energy medicine is so important. And so it allows us to build the body and to repair the body, and it allows us to evolve as individual beings. So these are the functions of the etheric body. And then finally we actually build the physical body. And basically, if we're living on planet Earth as human beings, we're basically carbon-based life, which means that basically we've taken the building materials we've taken in are basically carbon and hydrogen and oxygen and nitrogen. Basically those four. There's a few other little trace elements, but basically those four. And we pick those up from three sources. We pick them up from the food and drink we eat. We pick it up from the air we breathe, and we pick it up from light through our retina. That's the three ways in which we take in molecules of carbon and hydrogen and oxygen and nitrogen and build our bodies for ourselves and repair our bodies for ourselves. And then we have to eliminate, because we're constantly renewing the building. It's almost as if you were to build a house with, let's say, 1 million bricks, and every nanosecond you take one brick out of the wall and you chuck it away and you replace it with a look-alike brick. So that at the end of 7 years, there's not a single brick in the house that was there 7 years ago. But the house looks the same, because you've replaced it according to the same blueprint, the etheric body blueprint. So that's why we can recognize ourselves. When you look at a photograph taken 20 years ago and you say, oh, there's me, when I was in school. Well, what's you? There's not a single molecule in you today that was in you 20 years ago. So what are you saying is the same? The etheric body is the part that you're recognizing. And so we have to replace constantly. And the three ways in which we replace by sweating, we replace by breathing out, and we replace by elimination. And so that's the way in which we are building this body constantly. So that, it seems to me, is how we actually go about making the word become flesh. Now there's one interesting side effect from the last levels of body, from the mental body to the astral body, to the etheric body, to the gross body. There's one serious side effect to these four levels of body. And the side effect is this. It's the illusion of separate identity. At the level of causal body and at the level of Atman, which is soul, and obviously at the level of spirit, there is no distinction between us. We do not see ourselves as separate entities. We see ourselves as articulations of the same source. But from mental body to astral body, to etheric body, to gross body, we're surrounded by the illusion that we're separate from each other, and we operate out of egoic kind of concerns. So that's the problem about the word become flesh. The last few levels of body create these issues for us. So that, it seems to me, is how the word actually becomes enfleshed. That's my first point. My second point then is, when does the word become flesh? Now, I believe personally that the word can become flesh at any stage between conception and birth. I do not subscribe to the theory that a soul comes in necessarily only at the moment of conception. That a sperm meets an egg and a zygote is formed and bingo, a soul comes right in at that moment. It may, and it may not. It may come in at any stage of the process before birth itself. The soul may take up occupancy of the gross body which the etheric body has fashioned for whatever soul is available for occupancy. But it doesn't have to happen at the beginning. It can happen at any stage right through the process. But it's a little bit more complicated than that even, because the very ingredients of the gross body which are there before the soul comes in, those ingredients themselves are also the Word made flesh. A carbon molecule is the Word of God made flesh. It's the Word of God as a carbon molecule. Just like a tree is God as a tree, and a dinosaur is God as a dinosaur, so an atom of oxygen is God as oxygen, as an atom of oxygen. And so even the physical spacesuit that we will occupy, that physical spacesuit itself is composed of ingredients which themselves are words of God become flesh. So it's only a qualitative difference between them, because those elements have a kind of a group soul. It's not as if each individual atom has an independent, self-conscious soul. There's like a group soul. Atoms of oxygen as atoms of oxygen, the whole group of them, there's like a group soul that makes them specifically atoms of oxygen. But when a multicellular system gets together and is becoming more and more complex, it will call in a higher level of soul. So when you put together 50 trillion cells composed of carbon and hydrogen and oxygen and nitrogen, then there's a call sent out for a more advanced, a more complex form of soul to come in and to energize this system. And then a soul like a human soul comes in, takes occupancy and learns how to drive this particular machine. And it takes time. Little baby comes in, or the soul comes in, into a tiny scrunched up little body. It takes it years to figure out how to make it work. It's going to take it, almost a year to figure out how to make it stand upright and walk. It's going to take it 2 years to figure out how to use the vocal cords in order to produce language. It's going to take it 7 years to learn how to think rationally. It's going to take it 13 years to learn how to think self-reflectively. So learning how to drive this machine is very complicated. It takes a long, long, long time. But the soul eventually figures out how to do it. Now, in the very same way that the soul of a human being is much more complex than the soul, much more advanced than the group soul that animates oxygen atoms, so I believe that when a great soul is invited to energize, let's say, a planet, the soul that energizes planet Earth, let's call it Gaia, that soul is a much, much more advanced being than your soul or my soul. Because this is a soul that learns how to live inside and to activate, to produce, to grow and to evolve about 10 million different species of life on the planet right now. So it's an extraordinary intelligence, much more advanced than yours or mine. So that's like, I would call it a Mahatma or a mega soul. And as you walk way up, there are souls that energize entire galaxies or maybe entire universes. So we're talking about almost an infinite series of much more advanced souls. So we're somewhere down towards the end of this spectrum. So there we are, we come in at this stage. And this is who we are. And that's, I'm talking about the human journey. There are other people less advanced and more advanced than us, but that's pretty much where we come in. My third point then is, how often does the Word become flesh? Now, if you're a Christian, a fundamentalist Christian thinker, you think that it only happened once. That the Word only became flesh when the second person of the Blessed Trinity incarnated as Jesus the carpenter from Nazareth. I totally disagree with that. I do not believe that the Word of God only became flesh on one occasion when the second person of the Blessed Trinity became Jesus of Nazareth. Everything that exists in the manifest realms is a Word of God made flesh. So how often does the Word become flesh? Again and again and again and again and again. There is nothing you will see or hear or taste or touch or smell which is not a Word of God made flesh. It happens again and again and again. And when you open your eyes, you're surrounded by the Word of God made flesh. In all different levels and all different articulations. Some of them only need to build 3 or 4 bodies. We build 7 levels of body. Let's, for instance, take a reptile. Take a snake or an alligator. An alligator, it seems to me, has a mental body. It has an ability to kind of figure out how to operate in this incarnational world. And it also has an etheric body. It's created a template so it can repair itself. It can grow, it can evolve, and it obviously has a physical gross body, but it lacks an astral body. A reptile does not have a limbic system, so it can't dream, and it can't feel emotions. And so here's a creature, and it's just as much an articulation of the divine as you are, or I am. It's a Word of God become flesh, except for whatever reason it's chosen not to build an astral body for itself. It has a mental body, it has an etheric body, it has a gross body, it has no astral body. There's no dreaming here, and there's no emotions here. And that's a valid way of experiencing life on planet Earth. And then there are creatures out there, maybe we call them angels, who have extraordinarily developed bodies, but they don't have any physical body at all. And they may or may not have astral bodies. They may not dream or think, may not dream or feel, but they're extraordinarily intelligent entities. So intelligent, in fact, that it seems to me they have the capability, should they choose, to experience what it would be like to have an astral body or a physical body. And so they can choose to materialize in any form they want. They can choose to materialize as a human being and have an encounter, you can have an encounter with them. And they can materialize ex nihilo, or they can dematerialize and just disappear, or they can rematerialize, they can bilocate or multilocate, and they can time travel because they're not stuck in this particular dimension. So if you have that level of intelligence, you may or may not choose to take occupancy of a physical body, an etheric body, or an astral body, or you may just choose to do it on occasion, but it's not your normal condition. So it's happening all the time, all over the place. The Word of God is constantly being enfleshed in miraculous ways, if we have the eyes to see it. Which brings me to my final point. Is it only the Word of God that becomes flesh? And again, I would say absolutely not. Every single word of yours can become flesh. And so this is why Jesus warns us very, very carefully. You will be held accountable for every idle word, for every idle thought. Because everything you think has the possibility of actually becoming enfleshed, manifesting in some way. And this is the great law of karma. Karma is not a punitive model that says God will punish you for doing something. Karma, God is not a cosmic CPA that's keeping a record of your thinking and your doing. Rather, every thought has its own consequences. And so, if you do A and B occurs as a result of it, and you like B, keep doing A. If you don't like B, you got to stop doing A. So that's the law of karma. Every thought has the ability to manifest itself. But it does it in one of three ways. It will happen, it will manifest either as a subsequent experience or issue later on in this life, or will manifest right now in a parallel universe in which you're going to split off and have a parallel experience with that thought and that focus as a major issue for you to contend with. Or you'll create a lifetime, a reincarnation lifetime, in which this will be a major focus of your living and your incarnating. But you'll do it in one of three ways. Now the good news is, it doesn't have to happen. There's like a time lag between it. So it's not that every stray thought I have is going to result in a brand new universe or a brand new parallel experience. Only those thoughts to which I go back with frequency and with intense focus, they're the ones I recreate and I enflesh and I manifest. So we have to be really, really careful what we give that kind of focused, intense attention to, because that surely will manifest. It will definitely come into being. And propaganda is the art of knowing that and watering those kinds of thoughts, seeding them and watering them so that if enough people, frequently enough, with enough intensity, go back to that particular kind of thought, it will manifest as a new reality and a lived experience for the whole species itself. So we have to be really, really careful what we're feeding ourselves and where we're allowing our energy to go as we think our way through life. Reality is not a given that's out there that we happen upon. Reality is a state of mind that we create as a species by the thinking we go back to again and again and again. And this, unfortunately, is the art of propaganda. You seed the thoughts you want people to think, and then you water them through the mass media by going back again and again and again and again to those thoughts. Thinking is an act of copulation in which we impregnate the womb of all possibility with the children of our desires. If I am thinking thoughts of anger and violence and prejudice and hopelessness, I will surely give birth to deformed monsters. Whether I'm doing that as an individual, whether I'm doing that as a member of a group, or I'm doing that as a member of a species. I'm convinced that warfare itself is the deformed monster that we give birth to by our species-wide fascination with violence. And as long as we continue to think violent thoughts, and we're fed by the media, and we're fed by nationalism, violent thoughts, we will continue to breed and to bring forth monstrous, deformed children of warfare. When we have the courage to start finally listening to the avatars and the great teachers and the mystics, and we start thinking thoughts of love and compassion and forgiveness and hope, then we give birth to children of light. So the choice is yours and the choice is mine. Every one of us is a parent. Every single one of us is a parent. We have bred and given birth to children. The question is, are we giving birth to deformed monsters of anger and rage and prejudice and hurt? Are we giving birth to children of light? Be very careful what you think. Think lovingly and then act locally.